Long before the word empire carried the weight of continents and centuries, before it implied domination over diverse peoples bound together by law, force, and ideology, the lands between the rivers were already ancient. Mesopotamia, the fertile expanse stretching between the Tigris and Euphrates, had known kings, cities, wars, and gods for millennia before the birth of Sargon of Akkad. Yet despite its antiquity, despite its brilliance in agriculture, writing, and religion, Mesopotamia remained fractured. Power was local. Authority was personal. Allegiance was owed to city, god, and ruler, but rarely beyond the horizon. This was a world of city-states: Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Kish, Umma, Nippur. Each stood as a political island, fiercely independent, defined by its walls, its patron deity, and its ruler. These cities traded with one another, fought with one another, and competed endlessly for land, water, and divine favor. Alliances were temporary. Conquests were limited. Even the most ambitious kings ruled not realms, but neighborhoods of power measured in days of marching rather than months. The idea that all of Mesopotamia, let alone lands beyond it, could be ruled by one man was not merely untested. It was almost unthinkable. It was into this divided landscape that Sargon emerged. His rise did not simply replace one ruler with another, nor one dynasty with a stronger one. It shattered the political imagination of the ancient world. Sargon did not seek to dominate a city. He sought to dominate all cities. He did not aim to be king of Kish or Uruk or Akkad alone. He aimed to be king of everything the sun touched, from the lower sea to the upper sea, from the rising of the sun to its setting. In doing so, he created something entirely new, a centralized, multi-ethnic empire held together not only by conquest, but by administration, ideology, and permanence. The story of Sargon the Great is therefore not merely the biography of a man. It is the story of a transformation in human political organization. It marks the transition from local kingship to imperial rule, from temporary dominance to institutionalized power, from fragmented sovereignty to centralized authority. His reign forced later generations to reckon with the possibility that order could be imposed across vast distances, that different peoples could be ruled under a single system, and that kingship itself could transcend tradition and geography. Yet Sargon remains a paradoxical figure. His empire was vast, but the city he founded has never been found. His influence was immense, but much of his life is known only through legend. His name became synonymous with greatness, yet his origins were deliberately obscured, mythologized, or erased. To later generations, he was both historical king and archetypal ruler, both man and myth. His life sits at the intersection of history and storytelling, where fact and ideology intertwine. To understand Sargon, one must first understand the world he overturned. One must understand Sumer, its political rivalries, its religious structures, its economic foundations, and its limitations. Only then can the scale of Sargon's achievement be fully grasped. Only then does his empire appear not as an inevitability, but as a radical and unprecedented act of ambition. This work traces Sargon's life and legacy in full narrative detail. It begins not with his birth, but with the world that made his rise both possible and extraordinary. It follows his ascent from obscurity to kingship, his conquest of Sumer, the creation of the Akkadian Empire, the mechanisms of his rule, and the myths that surrounded him even in antiquity. It examines his legacy through his descendants, through language, literature, and imperial ideology, and through the memory of later civilizations who looked back to him as the first and greatest empire builder. Sargon did not merely rule the world as he found it. He redefined what the world could be. Before Sargon, Mesopotamia was a land of cities rather than nations. Its political landscape resembled a mosaic of fiercely autonomous urban centers, each jealously guarding its independence, its resources, and its relationship with the divine. These cities were ancient beyond reckoning. Some had been continuously inhabited for more than 1,000 years by the time Sargon was born. Their temples rose above canals and fields, their ziggurats dominated flat horizons, and their scribes recorded contracts, hymns, and laws in cuneiform impressions pressed into clay. Each city-state was, in essence, a world unto itself. At its center stood the temple complex, believed to be the earthly home of the city's patron god. The god owned the land. The god protected the people. The king ruled not as an absolute monarch, but as a steward of divine property. Political authority was therefore inseparable from religious legitimacy. A king who lost favor with the gods could be overthrown, and a city that fell in war was believed to have been abandoned by its deity. Power in Sumer was deeply personal and intensely local. Kingship did not automatically pass smoothly from father to son. Dynasties rose and fell with alarming speed. Warfare was constant but limited. Battles were fought over canals, grazing lands, and border fields. Victories were celebrated, but they rarely resulted in lasting control beyond the immediate region. A city might dominate its neighbors for a generation, only to be humbled by a rival coalition shortly afterward. Uruk, one of the oldest cities in the world, had once dominated much of southern Mesopotamia. Lagash and Umma waged generations-long wars over fertile land. Kish, located further north, claimed ritual primacy as the city where kingship first descended from heaven. Nippur, though not politically dominant, held immense religious authority as the cult center of Enlil, the chief god of the Sumerian pantheon. Control of Nippur meant legitimacy. Losing it meant political vulnerability. This fragmented system fostered innovation but discouraged unity. Trade flourished between cities, yet trust remained fragile. Legal systems varied from city to city. Weights, measures, and administrative practices lacked uniformity. While scribes shared a common writing system, political ideology remained stubbornly parochial. A king's duty was to his city and its god, not to humanity at large. Occasionally, a powerful ruler attempted to transcend these limits. Lugal-Zagyesi of Uruk, in the generation before Sargon, came closer than any predecessor. Through conquest and alliance, he managed to unite much of Sumer under his control. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that the city-state system might evolve into something larger. Yet Lugal-Zagyesi's power rested on fragile foundations. His authority remained personal rather than institutional. His realm lacked administrative cohesion. When challenged by a determined rival, it collapsed with startling speed. That rival was Sargon. What distinguished Mesopotamia on the eve of Sargon's rise was not weakness, but exhaustion. Centuries of rivalry had produced wealth and culture, but also instability. The cities were rich, but divided. Their armies were experienced, but localized. Their kings were proud, but limited by tradition. The political imagination of the age had reached its ceiling. It took an outsider, a man not bound by the old hierarchies, not constrained by inherited legitimacy, to break through it. Sargon's world was therefore ripe for transformation. The tools of empire already existed. Writing, bureaucracy, surplus agriculture, professional soldiers, long-distance trade. What did not yet exist was the will to assemble these tools into a single, centralized system of rule. Sargon supplied that will. Before Sargon, Mesopotamia was a chorus of competing voices, each proclaiming its own supremacy. After Sargon, it would learn the sound of a single command. The life of Sargon of Akkad begins not with certainty, but with silence. Unlike many kings whose lineage was proclaimed in stone and whose ancestry was traced through generations of divine favor, Sargon entered history without a clear genealogy. His origins were not merely obscure, they were deliberately obscured. This absence was not accidental. In a world where kingship was traditionally inherited and sanctified by ancestry, Sargon's lack of noble lineage was a vulnerability that later tradition sought to remedy through myth. What survives of Sargon's early life exists at the intersection of history and legend. These stories, preserved in later literary texts, do not aim to record facts in the modern sense. They aim to explain power. They justify authority. They transform a man who sees the throne into a ruler destined by fate and favored by the gods. Yet beneath their symbolism lies a truth no less remarkable. Sargon rose from outside the established ruling elite to become the most powerful man the ancient world had yet known. According to the most famous legend, Sargon was born in secrecy. His mother, unnamed and often described as a priestess, concealed her pregnancy and, unable to keep the child, placed him in a basket sealed with bitumen and set it upon the waters of a river. The river carried the infant downstream, where he was discovered by a gardener or water drawer named Aki, who'd raised the child as his own. The imagery is unmistakable. It echoes ancient Near Eastern motifs of abandonment and salvation, of divine intervention through natural forces. The river, a symbol of chaos and life alike, becomes the instrument of destiny. The legend does not end with survival. It continues with elevation. The gardener's son grows not into obscurity, but into favor. The goddess Ishtar, embodiment of war, fertility, and kingship, notices him. She grants him love, protection, and ambition. In some versions of the story, she actively intervenes to remove Sargon's name from a list of those condemned to death, saving him from a jealous king. The message is clear. Sargon does not rise because of his birth, but because of divine choice. Historically, these legends obscure more than they reveal. Yet they serve an important purpose. They acknowledge that Sargon was not born a king while insisting that his rise was nonetheless legitimate. In a culture where kingship was believed to descend from heaven, Sargon's story reframes legitimacy as something granted by the gods directly, rather than inherited through blood. What can be stated with greater confidence is that Sargon was a Semitic Akkadian, part of a population that had long lived alongside the Sumerians but had rarely dominated them politically. Akkadian speakers had served as laborers, merchants, soldiers, and officials within Sumerian cities for generations. They were not outsiders in the geographic sense, but they were outsiders in the political hierarchy. Sargon's ascent therefore represented not only a personal triumph, but a shift in ethnic and cultural power. Sargon's first clearly attested role is that of cupbearer to Ur-Zababa, king of Kish. This position, far from being menial, placed Sargon at the heart of royal power. The cupbearer was responsible for protecting the king from poison, overseeing banquets, and managing aspects of palace administration. It was a role requiring trust, intelligence, and proximity. From this position, Sargon would have observed the mechanics of rule, the weaknesses of kings, and the ambitions of courtiers. Kish itself occupied a unique place in Mesopotamian ideology. Though not always the most powerful city, it held symbolic primacy. Kingship was believed to have descended first upon Kish after the flood. To rule Kish was to possess a kind of ancestral legitimacy that transcended military strength. For Sargon to rise within its palace was therefore significant. It placed him within the ideological heart of Mesopotamian kingship even before he claimed a throne. The circumstances of Sargon's break with Ur-Zababa remain uncertain, but later tradition suggests fear and prophecy played a role. The king, it is said, dreamed of his own downfall and perceived Sargon as the instrument of it. Whether through paranoia, political intrigue, or genuine threat, The relationship between king and cupbearer fractured. What followed was a decisive rupture. Sargon did not merely escape execution or exile. He seized power. This act alone marked him as a revolutionary figure. Usurpation was not unknown in Mesopotamia, but it was dangerous and often short-lived. Kings who rose through rebellion typically lacked legitimacy and were quickly replaced. Sargon's success lay in his ability to transform a seizure of power into an enduring system. He did not merely overthrow Ur-Zababa. He rendered Kish irrelevant as the sole source of kingship. Having consolidated his position, Sargon founded a new city, Akkad. The decision was both practical and symbolic. By establishing a new capital, Sargon freed himself from the entrenched religious and political traditions of older cities. Akkad was not bound to a single ancient god or priesthood. It was his creation, his instrument, his statement of independence from the old order. From Akkad, Sargon began his ascent. His first great challenge came from the south, where Lugal-Zarghezi of Uruk had recently unified much of Sumer. Lugal-Zarghezi embodied the highest achievement of the old city-state system, a king who ruled multiple cities while still operating within traditional frameworks. His authority rested on conquest, but also on recognition by religious centers like Nippur. To defeat him was to defeat the existing model of power. Sargon's victory over Lugal-Zarghezi was swift and decisive. He did not merely defeat him in battle. He captured him, humiliated him, and displayed him as a symbol of the old order's collapse. By leading Lugal-Zarghezi in chains to the sacred gate of Enlil, Sargon made a powerful statement. The gods had chosen a new ruler. The age of city-state supremacy was over. And this moment marks the true beginning of Sargon's empire. It was not simply a transfer of power, but a transformation of political reality. For the first time, all of Sumer fell under the authority of a single ruler who did not govern from one of its ancient capitals. The center of gravity shifted northward, away from tradition toward innovation. Sargon's early reign was marked by relentless movement. He campaigned continuously, crushing resistance, replacing rulers, and asserting control over trade routes and agricultural centers. His armies moved faster and farther than those of his predecessors, not because they were larger, but because they were organized differently. Loyalty was no longer to city or clan alone, but to the king himself. At the same time, Sargon understood the limits of force. He did not attempt to erase Sumerian culture. Temples remained. Gods retained their names and rituals. Sumerian scribes continued to write. What changed was the structure of authority. Kings became governors, independence became administration, diversity became subordination. The legends of Sargon's youth and rise therefore serve a dual purpose. They explain how a man without pedigree became king, and they mirror the broader transformation he enacted. Just as Sargon emerged from obscurity to dominate Mesopotamia, so too did Akkad emerge from anonymity to overshadow the ancient cities of Sumer. By the time Sargon stood unchallenged in Akkad, his identity had changed. The gardener's son, the cupbearer, the usurper, had become something new. He adopted a throne name that declared legitimacy itself. He presented himself not as king of a city, but as king of all lands. His personal story became inseparable from the story of empire. The man who began life without a recorded father would become the father of imperial rule. Once Sargon had seized Kish and founded Akkad, the struggle that followed was not merely a contest of armies, but a contest of systems. What confronted him was not a single rival king, but an entire political tradition built on the autonomy of cities and the sanctity of local gods. To rule Mesopotamia fully, Sargon would have to dismantle that tradition without destroying the cultural foundations upon which Mesopotamian life rested. The solution he pursued was both ruthless and sophisticated. The first phase of Sargon's ascent unfolded across the plains of southern Mesopotamia, where Sumer's ancient cities lay clustered along canals and rivers. These cities were wealthy, fortified, and proud. Each had survived centuries of warfare and knew how to resist domination, yet they were also divided, suspicious of one another and accustomed to fighting alone. Sargon exploited this fragmentation with precision. Rather than confronting all opposition at once, he advanced methodically. Cities that resisted were crushed publicly and decisively. Their walls were breached, their kings captured, and their authority dismantled. Cities that submitted were spared destruction, but stripped of sovereignty. In both cases, the message was the same. Resistance was futile, and independence was finished. Uruk, long a symbol of Sumerian greatness, fell early. With it fell the illusion that antiquity itself could protect a city from conquest. Ur, Lagash, Umma, Adab, and countless smaller centers followed. The fall of each city marked not just a military defeat, but a psychological one. The belief that cities could exist as independent worlds was eroded with every victory. Sargon's conquest of Nippur was particularly significant. Nippur held no great army and possessed little political ambition, but it was the religious heart of Sumer. Control of its temple complex conferred legitimacy, recognized throughout Mesopotamia. By securing Nippur without destroying its sanctity, Sargon effectively claimed divine approval for his rule. He did not replace the gods of Sumer. He presented himself as their chosen steward. As resistance collapsed in the south, Sargon turned outward. His vision extended beyond Sumer. To secure his empire, he needed to control trade routes, raw materials, and buffer zones. Mesopotamia itself lacked timber, stone, and metal. These resources came from distant lands, and whoever controlled access to them controlled the economic lifeblood of the region. Sargon therefore led campaigns westward into the lands of the Levant and Syria. These regions were populated by city-states and tribal polities accustomed to autonomy and trade rather than imperial subjugation. Sargon's armies advanced along river valleys and caravan routes, capturing strategic cities and imposing Akkadian authority. The movement of Akkadian troops into these lands was unprecedented. Never before had a Mesopotamian ruler projected power so far beyond the alluvial plains. To the east, Sargon marched into the Zagros Mountains and the land of Elam. These regions were both a threat and an opportunity. Elamite cities had long interfered in Mesopotamian politics, alternately trading with and raiding their western neighbors. By conquering Elamite centers and imposing Akkadian governors, Sargon neutralized a long-standing rival and gained access to valuable metals. The geographic scope of Sargon's campaigns transformed the nature of kingship. He no longer ruled a people defined by a single culture or language. His subjects spoke different tongues, worshipped different gods, and lived according to different customs. To govern them all, Sargon needed something more durable than fear. He needed structure. The old Sumerian system had relied on personal authority reinforced by ritual. Sargon replaced this with an imperial framework. Former kings became governors. Cities became administrative units. Tribute replaced voluntary offerings. Military garrisons ensured compliance, while bureaucrats recorded obligations and resources. The empire was no longer a patchwork of alliances. It was a hierarchy. Language played a crucial role in this transformation. While Sumerian remained sacred and literary, Akkadian became the language of command. Orders, reports, and royal inscriptions increasingly used Akkadian, binding the empire together through a common administrative voice. This linguistic shift did not erase Sumerian culture, but it subordinated it. Religion, too, was reorganized. Sargon presented himself not as the servant of a single city god, but as a ruler favored by the divine order as a whole. His relationship with the goddess Ishtar symbolized this new ideology. She was not confined to one city. She was a goddess of war and sovereignty across boundaries. By aligning himself with her, Sargon framed his conquests as divinely sanctioned acts of cosmic balance. The collapse of the city-state system was not immediate, nor was it uncontested. Rebellions flared repeatedly throughout Sargon's reign. Cities that submitted one year rose again the next, yet each rebellion reinforced the necessity of empire. Sargon responded not by retreating, but by strengthening his grip. Garrisons were expanded, governors were rotated. Royal family members were installed in key positions to ensure loyalty. Over time, resistance diminished. The idea of independence faded into memory. A new generation grew up knowing only imperial rule. For them, Akkad was not an intruder, but a center. The empire became normal. Sargon's rise thus marked a decisive rupture in Mesopotamian history. The city-state, once the highest form of political organization, was reduced to a component of something larger. Kingship was no longer confined by walls or canals. It extended across regions, peoples, and landscapes previously unimagined. By the midpoint of his reign, Sargon stood unrivaled. His authority stretched from the southern seas to distant western lands. His name was known across deserts and mountains. His rule was enforced not only by armies, but by the daily functioning of administration, trade, and law. The fall of the Sumerian city-states was not a sudden catastrophe. It was a transformation. Their gods endured, their culture survived, their people adapted, but their political independence was gone forever. In its place stood something new, vast and enduring, an empire. Conquest alone does not create an empire. It merely clears the ground. What distinguishes Sargon of Akkad from every ruler who came before him is not the scale of his victories, but what followed them. Where earlier kings accumulated territory only to watch it fracture upon their deaths, Sargon sought permanence. His ambition extended beyond dominance. He aimed for durability. To that end, he constructed a system of rule unlike anything the ancient world had previously known. At the heart of Sargon's empire lay centralization. Authority flowed downward from the king alone. Cities no longer governed themselves according to inherited traditions of local kingship. Instead, they became nodes in an imperial network, bound together by administrative oversight, military enforcement, and economic integration. This shift was gradual, but relentless. Each reform stripped autonomy from local elites and transferred it to the royal center. Sargon ruled from Akkad, a city deliberately positioned both geographically and ideologically at the crossroads of Mesopotamia. Unlike ancient cities weighed down by centuries of ritual precedent, Akkad was unencumbered by tradition. It owed its existence entirely to the king. As such, it functioned not merely as a capital, but as a symbol of the new order. From Akkad, decrees radiated outward. Tribute flowed inward. Loyalty was oriented not toward a god's temple, but toward the throne itself. To govern the empire's vast territory, Sargon replaced former kings with governors. These men, often Akkadians loyal to the crown, administered cities that had once ruled themselves. Their authority was deliberately limited. They answered directly to the king, collected taxes on his behalf, and commanded garrisons stationed within city walls. They did not rule by tradition or charisma, but by appointment. Their power derived from Akkad, not from local acceptance. This system marked a profound transformation in political identity. Under Sumerian rule, citizenship was tied to the city. Under Sargon, subjects belonged to the empire. Their obligations were no longer primarily religious offerings to a local god, but material contributions to an imperial economy. Grain, livestock, Silver and labor were extracted systematically and redistributed according to state priorities. Record-keeping became essential. Scribal administration expanded dramatically under Sargon's reign. Clay tablets tracked inventories, wages, troop movements, and rations. Writing shifted from a tool of temple accounting to an instrument of imperial control. Bureaucracy, once secondary to ritual, became the backbone of governance. The army formed the empire's spine. Sargon maintained a standing military force, unprecedented in scale and organization. These soldiers were not seasonal levies summoned only during crisis. They were professional warriors, fed, clothed, and equipped by the state. Their loyalty was to the king personally, reinforced by regular pay and proximity to power. This army was flexible and mobile. It combined infantry formations with missile troops and support personnel. Discipline and coordination replaced heroic individual combat. Soldiers marched long distances, campaigned across unfamiliar terrain, and fought repeated engagements without disbanding. This endurance allowed Sargon to respond swiftly to rebellion and project power far beyond Mesopotamia. Military presence was constant. Garrisons were stationed in key cities, not only to deter rebellion, but to symbolize imperial authority. The sight of Akkadian soldiers within ancient Sumerian walls served as a daily reminder that independence was over. Rebellion was not merely punished, it was anticipated and prevented. Yet Sargon understood that fear alone could not sustain an empire. He cultivated legitimacy through religion and ideology. He did not abolish local gods, nor did he impose a single cult. Instead, he positioned himself as the chosen of the divine order itself. His inscriptions emphasized his favor with major deities whose influence transcended city boundaries. In this way, Sargon redefined kingship as a cosmic role rather than a municipal one. This ideological shift was subtle but powerful. By presenting himself as the guarantor of order across lands, Sargon transformed obedience into a religious act. Serving the empire became synonymous with serving the gods. Resistance, conversely, became impiety. Trade was both a motive and a consequence of empire. Sargon's control over long-distance trade routes unified disparate economic zones. Timber from the west, metals from the east, and luxury goods from distant lands passed through imperial hands. Markets expanded, wealth accumulated. Akkad became a hub of commerce and culture. Standardization followed. Weights and measures were regulated. Contracts became more uniform. Economic integration reduced friction between regions and increased dependency on the imperial center. Cities that once competed economically now participated in a shared system. One of Sargon's most significant administrative strategies was the integration of his own family into governance. Sons were appointed to rule key regions. Daughters were placed in powerful religious offices. This ensured loyalty at critical points while intertwining political and sacred authority. The empire became, in effect, a dynastic network radiating from the king. This system was not without strain. Rebellions erupted throughout Sargon's reign. Subject cities tested the limits of Akkadian control, yet each uprising reinforced the necessity of centralized power. Each suppression refined imperial methods. Over time, resistance became less frequent and less effective. What emerged was not merely a conquered territory, but an administered world. Decisions made in Akkad affected lives hundreds of miles away. Orders issued by the king reshaped harvests, rituals, and labor across Mesopotamia and beyond. By the later years of his reign, Sargon ruled not as a conqueror constantly at war, but as an emperor overseeing a functioning system. His authority was embedded in institutions rather than reliant solely on personal presence. This distinction marks the true birth of empire. The machinery of rule he created would outlive him. Though the empire would eventually fracture, the idea of centralized imperial governance had been proven possible. Future rulers would inherit not only his territories, but his methods. Sargon did not merely conquer lands, he engineered power. The measure of Sargon's greatness does not rest solely in what he conquered, but in what endured. Empires rise and fall, but ideas persist. Long after the walls of Akkad crumbled and its location faded from memory, the structure Sargon imposed upon the world continued to shape political imagination. His reign altered how power was understood, how authority was justified, and how history itself was recorded. One of Sargon's most profound legacies was linguistic. Under his rule, Akkadian rose from a spoken vernacular to a language of state. While Sumerian retained its sacred and literary prestige, Akkadian became the medium of administration, command, and empire. This was not a sudden replacement, but a layering. The empire spoke in two voices, one ancient and ceremonial, the other practical and expansive. Over time, this duality shifted, and Akkadian became dominant across Mesopotamia. Language was power. By standardizing Akkadian as the language of governance, Sargon created cohesion across regions that had never shared a common political identity. Officials from distant lands could communicate within a unified bureaucratic framework. Orders could be transmitted without translation into local idioms. Authority became legible and portable. The promotion of Akkadian also carried cultural consequences. Literature evolved. New poetic forms emerged. Royal inscriptions adopted a tone of universality rather than parochial pride. Kings were no longer guardians of a city, but masters of the world. This linguistic transformation outlived the Akkadian Empire itself. For centuries afterward, Akkadian remained the language of diplomacy and statecraft across the Near East. Among Sargon's most enduring contributions to culture was his daughter, Enheduanna. Her appointment as high priestess at Ur was both a political and spiritual act. By placing a royal woman in one of the most sacred offices of Sumer, Sargon fused imperial authority with ancient religious tradition. Yet Enheduanna's significance transcended her role. She became the first known individual in history to write under her own name. Her hymns and devotional poetry reshaped religious literature. She wrote not as a scribe recording ritual formulae, but as a voice expressing personal devotion, exile, despair, and triumph. In doing so, she transformed the relationship between the individual and the divine. Her works survived long after her death, copied and revered by later generations. Through her, Sargon's dynasty achieved cultural immortality. Enheduanna's career also illustrates the sophistication of Sargon's rule. He understood that control required more than soldiers and governors. It required cultural integration. By honoring Sumerian gods through Akkadian voices, he bridged old and new worlds. His empire did not erase identity. It reframed it. As Sargon aged, his empire faced mounting pressures. Rebellions flared. Cities tested the strength of Akkadian authority. The sheer scale of the empire strained communication and logistics. Yet Sargon endured. He campaigned repeatedly, suppressing uprisings and reaffirming control. His reign, lasting decades, was remarkably long for an era defined by instability. The manner of his death remains unknown. No inscription records his final days. No tomb has been found. This absence only deepened his myth. Later traditions speculated, moralized, and reimagined his end. Some portrayed him as punished by the gods for hubris. Others emphasized his unmatched power and longevity. In truth, Sargon vanished from the historical record much as he entered it, surrounded by silence. What followed him was not collapse, but continuation. His sons inherited the empire. his grandson expanded it further. Though internal conflict and external invasion would eventually dismantle Akkadian rule, the concept of empire endured. Mesopotamia would never return to a world of independent city-states alone. Later, rulers remembered Sargon not as a distant ancestor, but as a benchmark. Kings measured themselves against him. Some adopted his name, others claimed to surpass his achievements. In Assyria and Babylonia, centuries later, royal inscriptions echoed his language and ambitions. To rule the world was no longer an act of imagination. Sargon had made it precedent. His legend grew with time. Stories exaggerated his birth, his victories, his divine favor. These myths reveal less about Sargon himself than about what he represented. He became a symbol of possibility, proof that a man of obscure origin could reshape the world through will, intelligence, and force. In this way, Sargon achieved a form of immortality. Not through monuments which eroded or cities which vanished, but through memory. He became the first emperor, and that title endured. To understand Sargon the Great is to witness the moment when human political organization crossed a threshold. Before him lay a world defined by cities, gods, and borders measured in walking distance. After him stood a world of empires, administration, and power projected across continents. Sargon did not invent civilization, but he redefined its scale. His life embodies transformation. From obscure origins, he rose to command armies, dismantle traditions, and impose unity upon fragmentation. He confronted a world accustomed to rivalry and replaced it with hierarchy. Where once kings ruled by ancestral right, he ruled by conquest and competence. Where once power was local, he made it universal. Sargon's empire was not merely large, it was conceptual. It required new ways of thinking about authority, loyalty, and identity. Subjects were no longer citizens of cities alone. They became participants in a shared political order. This shift altered how people understood their place in the world. His achievements were not without cost. Conquest brought suffering, centralization suppressed autonomy, rebellion was met with force. Yet these realities do not diminish the magnitude of his impact. They underscore it. Empire is not born gently, it is forged. Perhaps Sargon's greatest legacy is that he proved empire possible. Once proven, it could not be unproven. Every empire that followed, from Assyria to Persia and beyond, stood in his shadow. Even modern concepts of centralized governance trace their lineage to the structures he pioneered. Sargon's story endures because it captures a universal tension, the struggle between tradition and innovation, between locality and universality, between inherited order and imposed unity. He resolved that tension not by compromise, but by transcendence. The rivers still flow where Akkad once stood. The cities he conquered have risen and fallen many times over. Yet the idea he introduced, that one ruler could bind many worlds into one, remains alive. That idea was his true empire. And so ends the story of Sargon the Great, a man who rose from obscurity to reshape the ancient world and redefine what power itself could mean. From the fertile plains of Mesopotamia to the far edges of the known world, his legacy echoes in every empire that followed. Long after Akkad vanished into the dust of history, the idea Sargon forged endured, that many peoples, many cities, and many cultures could be bound under a single rule. If you enjoyed this deep journey into the birth of empire, consider leaving a like. It helps this channel reach others who love history as much as you do. Subscribe for more long-form, narrative-driven explorations of the ancient world, and let me know in the comments which figure or civilization you would like to explore next. Until then, remember, history is not just the past, it is the foundation beneath our feet.